Hey guys, so I went over the basics of TypeScript yesterday, but we were using the default TypeScript compiler settings, and those are actually not the best. So what I'm going to show you today is how to configure how TypeScript compiles and checks your code. So there's this file called a tsconfig, which has basically all the settings for your TypeScript compiler and what it should be doing. And we can create a dummy one by doing tsc --init, and it'll go ahead and create one for us. And Microsoft was nice enough to also put some comments on the right side and tell us what the heck this stuff means, because there's a lot of settings you can turn on and off. And I'm also kind of going to walk you through the ones that I usually use and what they do. So first off, you can see the target and the module. Target is what you want it to be compatible with, like what it's going to compile your code down to. Now, it looks like by default it's ES5, and we can turn, if you look over here, we can amp it up to some greater ones. Now, I tried running it with like ES 2018 or some of the later ones, and it didn't seem to change the code in any way, at least when it was emitted. So if I do that, and we look at what the JavaScript that this created, you'll notice it's still using var, it's still creating functions like this, so it must be for some other functions or some other things that this affects, but the emitted code didn't change, at least the target. But usually I have this on like ES 2016 or ES5, one of those depending on what I'm doing, but I think for the most part I'm usually on 2016. And then module, this is really just how a JavaScript, you want your JavaScript modules to work, and for the most part I just leave it on common.js. I don't think I really changed any of these unless I'm like having a problem, and then I'll go search and it'll be like, hey, change your module. For the most part I just keep those. Next thing is we can now turn on and off this lib thing. This is for adding extra types and whatnot, the check. You don't really have to worry about this for the most part unless you get errors in your TypeScript saying that things don't have types, and then you have to go add a library. And this is where you would do it. So for example, here's what I use, my TypeScript config file, and this is for a node project, and you can see I'm using ES6, and then you can also see here are some libraries that I had to add to be able to have types for things. So I was using Apollo Server or GraphQL Yoga, I think, and it needed these async iterable in the ES 2017. So those are some example of libraries that you might need to add. Here you can see you can allow JS and check.js. I usually don't even worry about that, because if I'm using TypeScript, I'm usually not doing this with JavaScript. But this can be nice if you're like migrating files, a big JavaScript file project over to TypeScript, and you want it to allow compiling to that. But whenever I have done, I've done some migrations in the past from JavaScript to TypeScript. Every time I turn on allow.js, it doesn't really seem to work that well. It compiles it okay, but I just have like problems with the types in the TypeScript after allowing JS. So I usually just convert everything to TypeScript and then do stuff. Anyway, you don't have to worry about JSX unless you're doing React. Declaration, this is for when you have a library or an npm package. So if you're planning on creating a npm package that's going to use TypeScript, you want to turn on declaration to true, because what this will do is this will allow you to get the types of all your stuff, so like other people can access your types. And we can turn this on real quick and we can see what this does. I don't know if we're gonna have any good types in this, and I don't think I'm exporting anything, so I don't know if this is just gonna be empty or whatnot. But as it says, it creates a .d.ts file with all the types that you have. And I guess I don't have any types, so it's not creating anything. I guess what I could do is export a type right here. So I'm going to say export my interface random type, and let's say I use this type somewhere in my code. x is going to be a number and name is going to be a string. And I think it should create something now. Doesn't look like it. Not sure what's going on with that. Usually what happens, as it says, it generates a .d.ts file. And maybe it's because it's not using the config by default. So what I was going to talk about next was the outer and the router. So if we turn these guys on, we can specify, usually you don't just have one file, but you have source and you have a bunch of TypeScript files in there. And then, so what you'd specify is you want to TypeScript to compile all the files in the root directory, which in this case is going to be source. And then you can specify, alright, I want this to compile to a folder called build. So now when I run this, I no longer say like source/main or something like that. All I do is TypeScript and it will look for my tsconfig and then it will build that. And alright, so it went ahead and created my .d.ts file now, and if we look at that, we can see it does have this exported type. So now other people that are using my npm package would be able to grab these types. Okay, the other thing is source maps. Usually I turn that on, and that's for just errors usually. And out file, don't really know what that is. I haven't really used it. Concatenate and emit output to single file. Looks like it's for combining them all into one. Remove comments, that's pretty self-explanatory. It would just remove the comments that I have in my code in TypeScript. Seems like a good thing to turn on. No omit, not sure what that is. Not sure what really, I haven't really used any of these settings right here, but I could read those and check them out. This is the important section right here. I usually turn them all on. And then I haven't heard of always strict. Looks like what it does is it adds use strict in your JavaScript code. I haven't tried this before. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it on. Seems like it would be just a plus. This basically makes the type checking stricter. And you don't have to have this on, but you get the most benefit from TypeScript if you do this. So I was talking about this yesterday, strict null checks. And this is when we had this object2. And object2 has the property x and y, but it is of the interface x, y, and z. And z is optional. So now when I do something like object2.z plus 5 or 45, it's going to be like, hey, that's possibly undefined, right? And in this case, it actually is undefined, right? So what we'd have to do is be like, if object2.z, then we can do some addition like that, right? So it's nice that TypeScript can now catch some of these basic mistakes that we make. And also now you can't just not specify the type. So when I do something like this, I think by default this is, I guess we specified the type here, but if I were to get rid of that, there we go. So we have not specified the type of this x. So by default it is any. But we turned on this setting called no implicit any. So what that means is I have to specify the type of this. So I have to put number there so it knows. Or I could just do add func. And by the way, I don't need that there because I already have it defined and specifying the types up here. Okay, what are the other stuff? Strict types. I don't know exactly what this one does. I guess you have to have function types. And then also this one, strict property initialization is, I think you just have to specify like a default value for the property. I think sometimes I will turn this off, as it comes in be a problem sometimes with React. No implicit this, always strict. I don't know exactly what some of these do, but I just know they are like in my code when I'm coding these. I will see them turn on and I like them. And you can always come back and turn them off if you're like, I don't really like that setting or whatnot. These are really nice, these little checks right here. I'll usually turn all of them on. They're just basically wasteful code that you can get rid of. So no unused locals, no unused parameters. What that means is if I'm like const b or not used is equal to 5 or whatever. So this is not being used, so it would be like, hey, this function is not being used. It's not telling me that it's not being used though. I don't know why. Maybe I need to wrap it in like maybe a function. So it's random function. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's just not checking the type. I wonder if it will compile, or if it'll throw an error. Something is being, okay, here we go. So it says A is declared, but the value is never read. So it's not showing it right now in my editor for some reason. I don't know if it's just not looking at the right tsconfig or what. But random func is declared and never read. So you'll get these. So all of these things are not being used, and I could just delete them if I wanted to. We'll go ahead and turn this off so we can compile our code for other things. But that's what that check does, and I like turning that on. This stuff right here I don't really touch that much. I'll turn on that sometimes. This has to do with importing things. This is something you can flip on and off depending on how you want to import stuff in TypeScript. This stuff is for I believe when you want to import things and you want to use like relative versus absolute imports. So if I have something like main2.typescript and I want to import that in this one, import main2, I would usually do that, right? What that'll allow you to do is get rid of this dot slash, and I could just do it like that. So it knows that I should be starting from the source, and you can also do something like this. We'll just call this components, and we'll call this header.typescript. So again, instead of doing dot slash header, components, slash header, we would now just do this. And now it doesn't really make sense, or it's not really helpful when we're right here, but you can see where this could be helpful where I'm down here. So now if I want to import main, for example, instead of doing up, I guess just one, I could just import main from main. So it's helpful when you have like deeply nested stuff. It'll allow you to do like absolute imports. And I believe baster configures what you want it to start at. And then module resolution, how you want it to work. I think node is what you want. But I haven't played too much with that. I usually like just using relative URLs, but those are the settings if you want to play with that. Source root, I don't think I really mess with any of this stuff either. Right here. And then here's what I was talking about with the decorators. You can turn these on. This one you don't really need as much, the metadata. It is necessary for one library that I like to use called Typeworm. And I don't know why it doesn't like it. Maybe because there's not a comma at the end up here. There we go. We just didn't have a comma or something like that. But anyway, this will allow you to use decorators, and decorators are the things where you see like function, mutation. I think it's GraphQL is what you can do for Apollo. But I don't really use decorators too much. This is you need for Typeworm. I usually don't have that unless I'm using Typeworm. Yeah, but other than that, that's kind of like the settings. And I'll link, here is the actual settings that I'm using for this one TypeScript project that I'm using, the boilerplate that I'm working on. So I'll link this in the description below so you can use this and check this out. And this is what I usually like to use. And I'll just, tweak stuff as I'm going along in the project. If I don't like what a setting is doing or whatnot, it's very easy to come in but Microsoft nicely added all this, information, this comments. So I just recommend looking through that and seeing what each one does. That's what I did once, and just see if it would be useful or not for me. And then also, if you're using React, if you do create React app using the TypeScript version, it comes with a nicely created tsconfig for that. So I just use the default for that. But that's it for this video, guys. I hope that was helpful on how setting up a tsconfig, and I'll see you next time.